Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. The right amount of cash flow with the least amount of units. Not the most amount of cash flow, but the right amount of cash flow. I'm going to answer a couple of questions throughout this video. One is from Dr. Dre, who reached out in a video that I made last week where I was talking about my cash flow just before retiring, what that looked like, and what my cash flow looks like now that I have been retired for a little over a year. I also want to talk about one of the reasons why I'm focusing on the right amount of cash flow instead of the most. I think that there's not a mistake, but a different way of looking at it that a lot of new investors do, where they think I want to maximize, I want a strategy that is going to get me the most amount of cash flow possible. And if you have that mindset where you're looking for the most, how do you stop? Where's the end goal? You'll just constantly be moving that end goal because the most always means more. So I'm looking at the right amount of cash flow. So I'm going to explain what the right amount is, and then I'm going to explain why the least number of units. So Dr. Dre reached out when I made that video with this question asking, when you're running these numbers, and I actually was very conservative. I ran that a couple months before I retired, where it showed my cash flow was about $168,000 a year, and I broke it down into how much I made per hour if I worked a 40-hour week, and how much I made per hour if I looked at it 24 hours a day. And I felt kind of silly for working. When I actually ended up the year, that cash flow was $203,000. So I was very conservative in my estimates, which is what I suggest most people doing, because if you have more than you need, you're never going to complain. But if you miss your mark, you have a lot to complain about. So the question from Dr. Dre was, while you're calculating these numbers on your cash flow, are you accounting for things like insurance, property taxes, maintenance? Which is a good question, because some people, when we're brand new, will say things like, my cash flow on my rental is $2,000 a month because the tenant pays me $2,000 a month. That's not cash flow. That's income. Income is very different than cash flow. Income is the amount of money coming in. Cash flow is what is left, what is yours after you take out things from your income, like principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So your PITI, your mortgage. You're going to take out those expenses that are known, and you're going to set aside a percentage of your gross rents that you choose for expenses that aren't known. Future expenses, repairs, maintenance, CapEx, vacancy, maybe property management, whatever those expenses are. For me, I chose 15%. And 15% ended up being, and I took a note here, last year, above the 203,000 was, what was it? I wrote it down. Why is it not here? $46,800 set aside for future repairs and maintenance, on top of the $203,000 that was my cash flow. So yes, Dr. Dre, I accounted for those. But let's take it a step further. I'm accounting for those to increase in the future. One of the cool things about real estate is it is an actual hedge against inflation. One of the things that makes inflation calculated is cost of housing. So when inflation goes up, it's usually a product of housing having gone up. So, hopefully you can't hear all the seals barking at me right over there. I want to bark back. It's a natural urge. I bark at dogs too, but I can bark at the seals. I'm not a racist. So I'm accounting for those costs to go up in the future, because since we've started tracking the rents in 1940, the data shows that there's never been a time, not once ever in a 5-year period, where market-wide rents went down. There are some times where a local area might go down, like when the car manufacturers move away from Detroit, or when the .com crash hits Silicon Valley. Those rents can go down. But I've diversified my portfolio by investing near several things like a Navy base, a port, a college, hospital, a Boeing or Amazon terminal, or a large population, so that 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 of those things can go away and I'll still have sources of tenants. Then I diversified my tenant base. I keep about 1/3 military, 1/3 Section 8, and 1/3 working or retired. Actually planning ahead for a plandemic, a prolonged government shutdown, which we could have in October, or a stock market crash, which we have every couple of years. My entire portfolio will not be impacted. So yes, I'm accounting for those, Dr. Dre, and I appreciate the question. So what is the right amount of cash flow? I explained I want the right amount, not the most, so that I can eventually hit my marker and stop and retire like I did last year without the goal of increasing my portfolio. Yes, the cash flow piles up and I will be adding rentals and more properties in the future, but it's not a goal, it's a byproduct of investing with a system that provides more cash flow than I need. So here's what the right amount of cash flow is. First thing we determine and focus on is finding your freedom number. This is not an amount of money. This is not $1 million or $10 million or $250,000, all the numbers I've heard people spit out when I asked them how much they need to retire. It's an amount of money that comes in monthly that you don't have to sell your life for 1 hour at a time. So our freedom number, to make work optional, which is my goal, you have most of the data. You can look at the last 6 months instead of trying to project the next 6 months. Look at the last 6 months. Look at bank statements, credit card statements, receipts. See what you've been spending. And almost everything that you've been spending money on is going to go down except for 1 or 2 things. Healthcare, your employer's probably been paying most of the premium, so now that's going to be 100% you. So you're going to have a couple of assets to pay for that. I have the healthcare duplex, the travel duplex, the vodka fourplex, the dating triplex. Break up your asset for every expense the way that it makes sense for you. It can be stocks, real estate, owning a business. You're going to have an asset pay for those expenses. Travel, I'm probably going to spend a little more. Instead of traveling 1 to 3 months a year, now I'm going to travel 9 months out of the year probably. But everything else, I'm not commuting for work. I'm not exhausted when I get home. I don't have to eat out every day for work. All of those things that we were spending money on, I'm not saving for retirement. That's a huge expense while you're working. I'm not paying the highest level of taxes on earned income. I'm now paying almost nothing in taxes. My tenants pay a lot of property taxes. But out of that $203,000 in profit last year, I didn't pay any. I paid 0 rental income tax because of this beautiful thing called, I want to say depreciation, but it's because of Congress. Congress is full of people who own real estate that keep making laws that benefit people who own real estate. It's so weird how that works. So because of depreciation and write-offs, I haven't had to pay, in over a decade now, a penny in rental income tax. The idea is, you learn your freedom number. How much is it costing you to live the life that you want? That is your FI number, financial independence. You're not financially free when you hit that number. For me, because I'm house hacking, I live for free. I was getting paid to live where I was in the last place, but this one I'm living for free. I'll have to do the number once the other unit's rented on what I'm getting paid to live here. But it's around $4,000 a month, even when I travel. The travel is the most expensive. I'm traveling to places like Thailand, Colombia. I had gone to Portugal. I'm going back to Thailand for a few months. But around $4,000 a month lets me live comfortably. I buy paid off cars. I have a vehicle that's producing cash flow to buy the next vehicle. So I didn't reach $4,000 in cash flow and say, okay, that's the right amount, now I can retire. No, that's financial independence. That's when work is optional, when you have as much money coming in that it costs you to live your life. I wouldn't retire then. For me, the right amount of cash flow is a multiplier of your freedom number. So the lower cost of living that you have, the bigger multiplier I would go with. If you can live on $1,000 a month, I would want you to have at least a 5-time multiplier so that you're ready for those unexpected things like a health problem or starting a relationship or something stupid. But eventually you're going to need more than what it takes you to live your life, so I want you to pad that with a multiplier. The more money that it takes you to live, the smaller multiplier I think you need. I need about 4,000, so I went with a 4-time multiplier. So when my cash flow passed $16,000 a month that comes in every month that I don't have to sell my life for 1 hour at a time, I felt silly going to work because I wanted time freedom, so I retired. So for me, the right amount of cash flow did 2 things. It hit that 4-time multiplier of what I wanted to be financially independent, and it hedged and grows with inflation. While my mortgages might go up small, I had an 80% increase on my homeowner's insurance last year and a 20% increase on my taxes last year. Sounds like a lot. That's a couple $100 a month. And I used the binder strategy last year on all of my tenants with an average increase of 20 to 28% of the gross rents. This was $250 to $500 increase that the tenants asked me to do, which easily covered for that huge increase in homeowners insurance. 80%, which was about $50 a month. Sounds like a lot. Break it up over the year. So the right amount of cash flow did those two things. Hit my multiplier of 4 and grows with inflation. But why the least amount of units? This is the second half of this. Why the least amount of units? Why was this so important to me? I am not an entrepreneur. I am an investor. I'm a lazy investor. One of my strongest motivations to reach financial freedom and make work optional is that I didn't want to have to work. I loved the job that I had, but having to work is not something I wanted. That lazy is a powerful motivator. And since I know I'm lazy or busy, I knew that as I added properties, if I kept my systems to where it took a minimal amount of my time, I would be motivated to add more units to reach that freedom number. Because I wouldn't want one rental that gave me my $16,000 a month, because one tenant not paying their rent now is a huge impact. One building burning down is a huge impact. I did want some units spread out, right? I have my properties more than 10 miles apart next to all of these economic drivers that I named, but I wanted enough units so that I can handle 2 or 3 or 4 tenants not paying rent, still have revenue coming in from other units. So I didn't want just one. But the least amount of units for me means I didn't have the targeted goal of growing the biggest portfolio I could. I didn't want bragging rights on unit count. I didn't want bragging rights on net worth. I didn't want, what was it? Yeah, there was something else too. When my memory kicks in. You don't need a good memory to invest in real estate. You need systems to make sure everything gets taken care of. So my goal was financial freedom to make work optional, not a big portfolio. I didn't want to, and here's the third thing I was thinking of. I specifically did not want to create, file this away, got a pen? I did not want to create generational wealth. I think creating generational wealth often is a mistake. It keeps somebody that has a very limited, maybe 70 to 80 years out of the billions that this rock floating through space is going to be here to live your life. You're trying to earn income for your offspring, who it's probably going to hurt. Why do you think people throw around the insult of, oh, that's a trust fund baby? Because if your kids, your nieces and nephews are expecting to inherit millions, you take away their motivation to be successful on their own. Yeah, my kids will inherit millions, but that's a byproduct of me reaching financial freedom. It's not the goal. I'm not continuing to grow my portfolio so that they have a better inheritance. I actually want them to think that they're not going to get anything. So I often tell them that when I'm about 70, I'm going to marry an 18-year-old and they get everything. I think I'm joking. So I want the least amount of units because managing properties or managing a property manager or taking care of a portfolio or running a business, the bigger it is, the more of your time it's going to take. And I've had people tell me, well, you're not retired, you own rentals. When I was working, it was 50 to 60 or more hours a week to work at the CDL school for the last decade. At least 50 to 60 hours a week. I'm averaging less than 2 hours a month to manage my, what was 16 and is now 18 rental units. To me, that's retired. But if I had 100, 130, 137, like Matt the Lumberjack Landlord, rental units that I self-managed or had even had property manager for, like Zuber does, I think the more I had, the more time it would take. That's more roofs, more water heaters, more garage doors, more tenants, toilets, and termites, and all the things we need to deal with. I am not an entrepreneur. I wasn't trying to grow a business. I am an investor. I wanted to put my money to work. So the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. And here's how I accomplish that, because you have a choice. As you're investing in real estate, we can either recycle capital. This is how you grow the biggest rental portfolio. I believe this is how Matt the Lumberjack Landlord and Zuber have grown to where they have over 100 units each. It's how Millennial Mike is going to have over 100 units himself, is because they're doing things like home equity lines of credit, cash out refinances. They've sold properties to 1031 the gains into the next property. You get bigger portfolios, larger rental numbers, but for the first 20 years, you have thinner margins. Now, exponentially after 20 years, they're going to be bazillionaires when I'm probably just a decamillionaire. So yeah, their end goal will be a bigger portfolio with bigger cash flow, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was financial freedom for the average person in less than 10 years, even if I wasn't starting from the best position, which I did. So instead of recycling capital, which I've never done, no HELOC, no cash out, no refi, no second mortgage, no sale for 1031, instead of thinner margins with more properties, I have thicker margins. I like thick, which benefits me in many ways in life. I like thick, but my cash flow averages a little over $1,000 a unit because I haven't recycled capital. What I chose to do is to recycle cash flow. For those first 5 to 10 years of investing, as I started having cash flowing units and reduced my income by house hacking, reduced my expenses by house hacking, I didn't go and get, in the first 5 years, a nicer car. It was 8 years of investing before I took my first vacation. I didn't let life creep kick in. I let that happen later, without the limitations, so that it can compound early on. I recycled cash flow to get the most, see, even I think that way sometimes, to get the most cash flow from the leased units, to get me the right amount of cash flow, which was that $16,000 a month or so, which last year averaged over $17,000 a month. This year, with this new additional property, I will see what it averages out. And I don't know that I'll even have it rented out by the end of the year, the other unit, but I'm renting out the room I moved from to do this new house hack, and I will be adding a unit, because this is a duplex, for more income. It's weird. It's like owning real estate is good for you. I hope that this video has at least made you think that yes, when we're investing, it's exciting to think of how big can I make this? Can I be the next Grant Cardone? Can I be the next Robert Kiyosaki, Chandler David Smith, whichever big investor with a large portfolio that you are taking parts of their strategy from. I watched still watch a lot of Kris Krohn's information. I love his motivation. But I have no desire to do most of the strategies that he's done. I've taken parts of his strategy for me to retire early by getting the right amount of cash flow with the least amount of rentals. Thanks for hanging out with me during this live stream. I tried to do this with a few notes, but I wanted you to see top of mind awareness. This is how I look at my real estate. I'm not looking at, I would get a better return if I sold a property because I have so much appreciation there. And then I took that money and bought 2 or 3 other properties. I have a dialed in property with a good equity position, but a dialed in tenant that takes, on the one I would sell, I think I've talked to that tenant twice in 3 or 4 years. I don't want to mess with that. I want the freedom to do things like this and stand out here and watch all the ships go by. If you're around here, Lady Washington, the pirate ship, is going out here every couple of hours now. That doesn't suck to sit out here and drink the hard water and watch the view, instead of trying to optimize and grow my portfolio bigger than it is. You guys have a week full of awesome. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.